Frantz Fanon is without a doubt the most significant theorist and practitioner of anti-colonial struggles. I think his thought is still relevant and we can use it to view what's happening in Gaza. First, a little bit about Frantz Fanon. So Fanon was originally from the island of Martinique, which was a French colony, and eventually went to France and studied psychiatry, which was then kind of similar as psychoanalysis. From there, he goes to Algeria and practices in the native ward, where he treats the Arab patients. Now, this is just a brief summation of his rich life, but while in Algeria, he also publishes his first book, which is called Black Skin, White Masks. Then his second book, A Dying Colonialism, and then before his death in 1961, The Wretched of the Earth. Now, all of these three books were published in French and then translated into English. While in Algeria, Fanon also joins FLN, the Algerian Liberation Movement, which was actively engaged in armed struggle against the French. Algeria by then had been a French colony for almost 200 years. So Fanon's ideas stem from his knowledge of psychoanalysis and a study of literal colonialism in Algeria. But what makes his thought richer is that he's also a psychoanalyst. So he looks at the psychological impact of material causes of colonialism. Now, if you look at his first book, Black Skin, White Masks, it's a wonderful and eloquent book. The main idea that I draw from it is that for Fanon, as he looks at the colonized Arab subjects, he realizes for the Arabs, but also for the African colonized subjects, that resolution of Oedipus complex is almost impossible for a colonized subject. What is the resolution of Oedipus complex, right? Simply stated, if we use Freud and then a little bit of Lacan, the resolution of Oedipus complex is that a child in the process of growing up acknowledges and accepts what is called the law of the father, right? The literal father, but also the metaphoric father, and submits to it with a hope that eventually he will also become a father figure. After Oedipus complex is resolved, that is when you become sort of a fully realized and functional subject. But what Fanon says is that within a colonial situation, the resolution of Oedipus complex is acknowledging and accepting the socio-political order installed by the white master. And because of that, it is almost impossible for the colonized people to resolve the Oedipus complex and move on, right? So the colonial experience makes it almost impossible for people to resolve their Oedipus complex. That's the insight that we get from Black Skin, White Masks. Now, Dying Colonialism and Wretched of the Earth are more radical books, because by the time Fanon writes those, he's already actively engaged in the Algerian struggle for freedom. And I think the insights provided both in the Black Skin, White Masks and the Wretched of the Earth are crucial in understanding what has historically happened to Palestinian people what has happened in Gaza and what is happening in Gaza right now. In the beginning of The Wretched of the Earth, Fanon first explains the nature of colonial experience. In his view, colonialism was established through acts of violence. Hence, to make themselves free, the colonized must actively overthrow their colonizers. That, for him, is a psychological necessity for the colonized to claim themselves as fully human. An ouster of the colonizer, physical removal of the colonizer. Whether you agree with that or not, that is what he theorizes through his study of psychoanalysis and trauma. Then in the beginning of the book, he also describes the physical manifestation of colonialism, right? So the colonial space, the urban spaces created by the colonizers, which are always separate from the native population, and the kasbah, the town, overcrowded, right, underdeveloped part of the native town. And within that, he then theorizes the role of desire and oppression. That if you have your dream world right in front of you, where the foreigners who came in and took your land live, and you live in poverty and in crowded conditions with not many rights, that place becomes your ultimate place of desire. That is what the native desires, to have that, to take away the people who live there and supplant them. That becomes a psychological imperative in colonial situations. The more the oppression increases, the desire to assert yourself and the desire to fight the oppression also constantly increases. In terms of psychology, there is no possibility that by oppressing the people more and by forcing them into a corner, you will make them submit. For Fanon, that does not happen if the native is still alive and wants to be fully human. Resistance is the only way through which that humanity will be expressed until, according to Fanon, the world is turned upside down, until the least becomes the first. So until the socio-political order established by colonialism is reversed. That is classic Fanon. So we got about 2-3 insights from two of Fanon's work. The first one, that resolution of Oedipus complex is impossible for the colonized subject because what he is expected to submit to, the law of the father, is the law of the colonizer, right? Which he cannot submit to unconsciously or consciously. 2, the division of space between the colonizer's dream world and the nightmarish world left to the colonized makes that space a place of desire. And since the colonized relationship was built on violence, it can only be undone by undoing the colonial project itself. These are the insights that we get from Fanon. I'm obviously oversimplifying him, right? So I encourage you to read his books, but I also have quite a few videos on Fanon, and I'll post the links in the description. Please go ahead and watch them, and those might also help you understand Fanon's work better. Now let us talk about Gaza, its past, and what's happening in the present, and then look at it from the insights we just discussed as provided by Frantz Fanon. Gaza is the world's largest prison. 2 2.1 million people or a little more live in this congested urban space. They are enclosed within a wall, an almost impenetrable wall, and there are only two entrances to that enclave, one from the Israeli side and one from the Egyptian side, and both are heavily controlled. Nothing goes in or comes out without the control of Israelis on one side and Egyptians on the other side. Within this confined space, people live their lives, build their lives within the chances that they can have there. And of course, there is a hierarchy, and people are governed by Hamas. Whether Hamas is elected or not, that's besides the point. But this is the largest prison camp in the world by any definition of prisons and camps. People of Gaza, the Palestinians, are also aware that Israelis have placed them in that position. That's the literal fact of history. They also have a very strong nationalistic ideology where they think of themselves as Palestinians who were evicted and displaced from their homes, which were mostly in the current day state of Israel. And then, coupled with that is the looking across or imagining across the border the beautiful places of the state of Israel. Now, these people cannot submit to this order and resolve their Oedipus complex, because that would mean giving up their own voice, their own identity, and succumbing to what the Israelis would like them to be, silent people who accept what's happening to them as their fate. So that's one impossibility, psychologically speaking, and Fanon has taught us that. The other aspect of it is, since their condition is established through brute force, the ultimate way of negotiating that is through equally stronger resistant force. Hence, the emergence of resistance isn't just that is accomplished through indoctrination, it is the psychological precondition and becomes the psychological imprint of living under occupation, encircled in the walls. So the very thing that the Israelis have created to control the Palestinians is the very thing that creates the psyche of resistance. That idea also comes to us from Fanon. And then, beyond that, reducing Gaza Strip to the largest urban slum in the world, and then juxtapose it against what's available to Israeli citizens who live on the land that these Palestinian subjects think was once theirs. Add that ingredient to it, and you have a perfect recipe for permanent struggle for freedom. And that freedom, ultimately in its excessive forms, would imagine ousting the oppressor, not just negotiating with the oppressor, undoing the physical oppressive conditions that exist. Now take it a step further. Right now, Gaza is pretty much all destroyed. People are starving. Hospitals are destroyed. Schools are no more, right? Now the Israelis' logic is that we're going to destroy Hamas and we don't care in the process how many people die. The hard right Israelis basically say there are no children in Gaza because everyone is a Hamas sympathizer. So their strategy, long-term or short-term, is vanquishing the Palestinian spirit through brute force and collective punishment. Now, I just discussed Fanon with you. What do you think are the chances that that strategy will create humble, meek, and silent people? If you look at it from a Fanonian lens, you can already tell that whatever is left in Gaza, whosoever survives this new invasion, they are not going to become meek and submissive people. That would be defying the basic dictates of a traumatized psyche. If they want to heal themselves, if they want to claim their full humanity, they will have to prove to themselves and to everyone else in the world that they are resilient and they will fight back and that they will not succumb to oppression. That is the logical, psychological outcome of oppression, and that is what is likely to happen. So let us look at the similarities between the history of Gaza, which I just briefly talked about, and what's happening in Gaza, and what Fanon was writing about. When Fanon was writing The Wretched of the Earth, FLN and the Algerians were in open revolt against French colonialism. There was a brutal war going on, and the French were brutal in their methods of putting down or trying to put down the rebellion. Right now, in Gaza, what is happening is actually far more brutal than what the French did. When Fanon writes about the Arabs in Algeria, what he writes about is that how the more brutal the French tactics becomes, the stronger the resistance becomes. And the reason it is becoming stronger is that there is no other way for the Algerians to claim their full humanity other than constantly fighting against the colonial system, because that's the only way they can truly express their full humanity. And the only way they can replace the colonial order in that context is through resistance. Gaza right now has almost been obliterated, right? People are starving. More than 33,000 people have been killed. The entire infrastructure is destroyed. More than 7,000 of those killed are children. Children are dying of curable infectious diseases. People are eating foods that were supposed to be fed to the animals. These are the facts of life. Now, what do the Israelis expect from these actions? Right? If you look at the right-wing people in Israel, including some cabinet ministers, their idea is that through these acts of collective punishment, they will be able to break the will of the people of Gaza and make them see that Israel is a powerful force in the world and they should not, so to speak, mess with it. If we take our Fanonian insights about how human psyche works and how it tries to heal itself and claim its humanity, that tactics has not worked for 76 years, and it is absolutely not going to work. So, in order for us to understand what's going on and to find a way forward, reading Fanon carefully and then applying those insights within the current context of Gaza is crucial and important. So to sum up, I started with Fanon. One insight from Black Skin, White Masks, which was that it is impossible for the colonized people to resolve their Oedipus complex under colonialism, because they cannot submit to the law of the father, because that law of the father is mandated by the colonial power. That was the case in Algeria, and that is the case in case of Palestinians, both in West Bank and Gaza. Then we took some insights from The Wretched of the Earth, especially about the colonial space in comparison to the crowded colonized space becoming a place of desire, and the colonial imposition being a violent act or a series of violent acts, the only way of claiming full humanity within that context is by actually overthrowing the oppressive system of colonialism. That was true within the Algerian context and is true within Gaza and West Bank and Palestinian and Israeli context. What we can take from this is that Fanon isn't just a theorist. He's also an active participant in a freedom struggle. That if we read him carefully, me, you, right, common people in this world, maybe we'll understand the dynamics of this beyond these are Palestinians and these are Israelis, and they somehow absolutely do not like each other. But Fanon enables us to look at it from a psychological and experiential point of view. And maybe if the US policymakers read him and looked at Gaza with that perspective, and if the Israelis did so, maybe they will change the way they view Palestine. They will change the way they treat Palestinians, and maybe that change then in perceptions and actions will eventually help us work toward peace for Palestinians and for Israelis. That's all that I wanted to say today. Now, if you have a few moments, please take a look at the playlist on Palestine that will come up. See if you can watch some of those videos and send me your comments. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. And as always, I'm deeply grateful to you. Thank you so much. Stay safe. And from me to you, as always, peace and love.